As Daenerys and William Bruce Targaryen head back in from the palace terrace, going past the stairs that leads to another staircase, library, and back into the hall of Targaryen genealogy. William takes his seat as she gives him another scroll. All right, William, you will now continue to learn about my father and why he starts showing signs of madness. It all started when he was taken captive, though Barristan Selmy, a very good friend of mine, did rescue him. And you'll learn more about him as well. But it's thought that perhaps that is where it first started, even though the signs weren't quite noticeable yet. As time went on, his appearance even changed, his character, his mood, all things that would not look, well, I guess, what would you say? Well, you mean like abnormal, not something like the way we would act. Yes. And in time, you will see that many things changed. Unfortunately, my uncle's secrecy, though nothing can be found in genealogical records and history, though he tried to disappear conveniently, the ones that my father had hired had ways of finding out who he was, and eventually, though he did not know it at first, my oldest brother Rhaegar found him. Because again, Targaryens are quite wise, and those who don't want to be found eventually are. It's the Targaryen way. I understand. I guess that's probably why you found me on the beach then. Gives her a smile, but she kind of shakes her head to not lose her train of thought. Yes, well, in any case, you see my point. So now my uncle, though he is not actually an uncle, um, he is dubbed an uncle because the aunt having AJ would actually be a cousin. But to keep this mysterious night a mystery, because my father found it most amusing that he be such a mystery, and being under the low key under the watchful eyes of the realm of the kingdom with no history, no genealogical records, decided to make it interesting and dub him an uncle. My father, I guess, would have thought that it would have been easier for us to understand. So, not to confuse us, because we are in exile. And I've known him ever since most of my life as an uncle. Um, so, it's nothing that me and my brother Viserys, who was alive at the time, ever made an issue of. So we all accepted him as an uncle. I know, that's good. Well, then at least it shows you came together close as a family. Well, we do try to value family and take in the family values because that's what makes a house strong. So, in any case, William, you will learn of things increasing, the tensions that are building within the House of Targaryen, and soon the great House of Targaryen and its name will come to fall, most sadly, before um, Rhaegar gets to have a chance to sit the Iron Throne, and is where the House of Baratheon takes over, while me and my brother Viserys, after my brother Rhaegar had been killed, are into exile. So with that, William opens the scroll, and she sits down, and the lesson continues. In King's Landing, we have King Aerys II Targaryen and his sister and wife, Queen Rhaella Targaryen, who are currently in ruling on the House of Targaryen, and King Aerys II Targaryen, father of Viserys III Targaryen and Rhaegar Targaryen, and soon to be father of the upcoming Daenerys Stormborn of the House of Targaryen, who sits the Iron Throne at present, or the realm of the kingdom. As we all know, that things are getting a little tense, and certain changes based on his mood are starting to be noticed. Things that would be considered in their world, in as much as a human Leanna Targaryen can understand, abnormal. But before his physical changes takes place, once again, Queen Rhaella Targaryen suddenly becomes with child. Little does everyone know that this child will be Daenerys Stormborn of the House Targaryen. In the meantime, there's a big talk about those called the Titan of Braavos. The Titan of Braavos is a massive stone and bronze fortress in the shape of a giant man, which guards the entrance into the lagoon, where the free city of Braavos is located. It is the primary line of defense for Braavos. The Titan is one of the 9 wonders made by man in the book written by Lomas Longstrider. When seen from the sea for the first time, the Titan is a terrifying sight. Here is what it's all about. The feet of the statue lie on 2 separate islands, including Seligaros' shield, and each foot is set upon a mountain. The islands are covered in soldier pines and black spruce. The legs and lower torso are made of the same black granite that form the islands upon which it stands. They were originally a natural stone archway, which was carved and shaped by 3 generations of sculptors and stonemasons. Above the waist, the Colossus is bronze, its body filled with halls and chambers, its bronze breastplate punctured with arrow slits. One hand rests on the top of a ridge, its broad fingers wrapped around the stone. The other hand is thrust into the air, holding the hilt of a broken sword. The Titan's head, rising 400 feet above sea level, is crested with a bronze half-helm and has green-dyed hempen rope for hair. In its eyes burn large beacon fires, lighting the way back inside the lagoon for returning ships. The Titan's hips are encased in an armored skirt of a green-bronze hue, the bottom covered in murder holes. Enemy ships can be steered onto the rocks by the watchmen inside the Titan, and stones and pots of burning pitch can be dropped onto the decks of any that attempt to pass between the Titan's legs without leave. However, this has seldom been necessary, not since the Century of Blood has any enemy been so rash as to attempt to provoke the Titan's wrath. The Titan's Roar. The Titan lets out a loud roar whenever his ship approaches its entrance to warn the arsenal of Braavos. The roar is huge, a terrible groaning and grinding blast so loud it drowns out most sounds nearby, and it can be heard across the lagoon in the city. The Titan also roars to herald sunrise and sunset, and the hours of the day are counted by its roar. During the anniversary of the uncloaking, at midnight on the 10th day, the Titan roars to signify the celebration celebrants should all remove their masks. Luther Tyrell. Luther Tyrell was a lord of Highgarden and head of House Tyrell. He is the father of the current lord, Mace Tyrell. In history, Luther had originally been betrothed to Princess Rhaegar Targaryen, but the pact was broken in 240 AC when she married her brother, Prince Jaeherys Targaryen. He instead married Olenna Redwine. Unfortunately, Luther rode off a cliff to his death while hawking. He had been looking up and not paying attention to where his horse was going. In history, Mace became Lord of Highgarden once his father, Lord Luther Tyrell, rode off a cliff while hawking. Now, for most people, they probably want to know, how do the Starks tie? As palace historian, I'm sure many of the 7 known kingdoms of the realm will tell me that I do have to get my facts straight, and the Starks do play a key role here. So, we're going to step back in time a bit and catch you up to speed as to how they fit in. Starting on the Stark Genealogy, Part 1. And as a side note, for anyone who is of the House of Stark, if you wish to go further back, beyond Rhaegar Stark, you will have to do your own research. However, Rhaegar Stark is the grandfather to Robb Stark, Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, Brandon Stark, and the siblings of the Stark family. Rhaegar Stark was Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, and head of House Stark during the reign of Aerys II Targaryen. He was the only child of Lord Edwyle Stark and Lady Marna Locke. Rhaegar was the father of the current Lord of Winterfell, Eddard Stark in the television adaptation Game of Thrones. He is portrayed by Wayne Foskett in a season 6 flashback appearance. In the Crypt of Winterfell, there is a statue of Rhaegar at his tomb, which is flanked by those of his eldest son, Brandon, and his daughter, Leanna. Rhaegar's engraving is said to match his appearance in life, with a long, stern face and quiet dignity. There is a stone direwolf at the statue's feet. Lord Stark owned steel armor with golden spurs. In history, the son of Edwyle Stark and Marna Locke, Rhaegar married his cousin once removed, Lyanna Stark, and had 4 children: Brandon, Eddard, Leanna, and Benjamin. Lord Rhaegar visited King's Landing in 264 AC, leading King Aerys II Targaryen to consider building another wall and claiming more land in the far north. Lady Olenna Redwine was loosely acquainted with Rhaegar. Rhaegar negotiated the betrothals of Brandon and Leanna to Catelyn Tully of River Run and Robert Baratheon of Storm's End, respectively. According to Barbary, Dustin, and the South-run marriages were the idea of Rhaegar's maester at the time, Wally's. Not easy being a palace historian and an old man. All right, where were we? Oh, yes. Before any of the marriages could take place, however, Leanna disappeared near Harrenhal in early 282 AC. Brandon held responsible Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Aerys' eldest son, and the heir to the Iron Throne, and went with a small company of young nobles to King's Landing to challenge Rhaegar. Aerys had them all imprisoned on charges of conspiring to kill the crown prince, and summoned their fathers to answer for the crimes of their sons. The nobles and their sons were executed by Aerys, with the exception of Ethan Glover. As was his right, Lord Rhaegar demanded a trial by combat, expecting to fight a King's Guard. Aerys granted Rhaegar's request, but to the Mad King. House Targaryen champion was Fire. Protected by Sir Gerald Hightower and Sir Jaime Lannister of the King's Guard, Aerys had Rhaegar suspended in the throne room of the Red Keep. Rhassart and another pyromancer lit a fire beneath Rhaegar while he was dressed in his steel armor. Brandon, with a Tyrashi noose around his neck and a sword just out of his reach, was made to watch his father roast. Trying to reach the sword to save his dying father, Brandon strangled himself. Rhaegar was succeeded by his second son, Eddard. Together with Lords Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully, and Robert Baratheon, Lord Eddard was a leader of Robert's rebellion, a revolt against the Targaryens that overthrew their dynasty. Some have blamed Rhaegar's alliances for the near fall of House Stark. One of Eddard's sons, Bran Stark, believes that his grandfather was beheaded by the Mad King. Lyanna Stark. Lady Lyanna Stark was the second daughter of Roderick Stark and Arya Flint. She was married to her cousin once removed, Lord Rhaegar Stark, and had 4 children: Brandon, Eddard, Leanna, and Benjamin. Of the Stark genealogy that is connected to the House of Targaryen by special and unforeseen circumstances, we now start with the father, the last known father anyway, Eddard Stark, and his brothers and sister. Brandon Stark. Brandon was the eldest son of Lord Rhaegar Stark and Lady Leanna Stark, and the heir to Winterfell prior to Robert's rebellion. His younger siblings were Eddard, Leanna, and Benjamin. Appearance and character. Brandon was, in appearance and character, very different from Eddard. He had gray eyes and was tall and handsome. Brandon was absolutely not shy about taking what he wanted. He was rather hot-blooded, a trait their father, Lord Rhaegar, described as originating from the wolf blood, quote unquote. Brandon shared this trait with his sister, Leanna, and Eddard believes this led them both to early deaths. Brandon was the best swordsman among his siblings and an excellent jouster. He loved to hone his sword, preferring it to be as sharp as possible. He also loved to ride and has been described by Barbara Dustin as a centaur in that regard. In history, for his early life, he was born in 262 AC at Winterfell. Brandon was the eldest son and heir of Lord Rhaegar and Lady Leanna Stark. Brandon was fostered at Barrowton with Lord Dustin, father of William Dustin. He spent most of his time riding in the rills. He took the maidenhead of Barbara Ricewell, who was infatuated with him. He was eventually betrothed to Catelyn Tully of Riverrun, who considered him to be more handsome than his younger brother Eddard. To Barbara, Brandon swore he did not want to marry Catelyn, but Lord Rhaegar's ambitions did not allow him to marry the daughter of a northern vassal. In 281 AC, Brandon was present at the tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC. There he was introduced to the Cranogman Howland Reed by his sister Leanna. During the opening feast of the tourney, Brandon asked Ashara Dane to dance with Eddard, who was too shy to ask her himself. Brandon later entered the lists, but was unhorsed by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. After Prince Rhaegar won the tournament, he crowned Brandon's sister, Leanna, as his Queen of Love and Beauty, passing over his own wife, Princess Elia Martell. Brandon had to be restrained from confronting Rhaegar, as he took Rhaegar's action as a slight upon Leanna's honor, since Leanna had been betrothed to Lord Robert Baratheon for a long time. Brandon might have been knighted, as he participated in the tourney at Harrenhal, which has been described as a tourney in which the finest knights and noblest lords of the Seven Kingdoms, quote-unquote, contested, suggesting the possibility that the tourney was a knights-only tourney, in quote-unquote. In addition, Brandon had a squire, Ethan Glover. As well, Brandon had been fostered at Barlton, located on the largest borough in the north. And although knighthood is rare in the north, borough knights, quote-unquote, are mentioned by Maester Lothlin in 298 AC as part of the Northern Army. In 282 AC, Brandon was present at River Run when the date for his wedding to Catelyn was announced. Peter Baelish, the ward of Catelyn's father, Lord Hoster Tully, challenged Brandon to a duel for her hand. They fought in the Lower Bailey at River Run. Catelyn begged him to spare Peter's life, and Brandon promised her to do so. Brandon armored himself for battle, aided by Catelyn's younger brother, Edmure Tully, who served as Brandon's squire. When Brandon saw that Peter wore only a helm and a breastplate and mail, he took off most of his own armor. Brandon was no match for the much younger Peter. He offered the boy several chances to yield, but when Peter kept refusing, Brandon ended the duel by injuring Peter severely. Afterwards, he departed River Run, promising Catelyn to return soon so they could wed. Eddard Stark. Eddard Stark, also called Ned, is the head of House Stark, Lord of Winterfell, and Warden of the North. He is a close friend to King Robert I Baratheon, with whom he was raised. Eddard is one of the major POV characters in A Song of Ice and Fire. In the television adaptation Game of Thrones, Eddard is played by Sean Bean, Sebastian Croft, Eddard as a child, and Robert Aramayo, Eddard as a young man. Appearance and character. Eddard has a long face and long brown hair. He is 35, but his closely trimmed beard is beginning to gray, making him look older than his years. His dark gray eyes reflect his moods, turning soft as fog or hard as stone. Eddard is shorter and less handsome than his older brother, Brandon, had been, according to Catelyn Stark. However, she also states that Ned has a good sweet heart beneath his solemn face, quote-unquote. He keeps faith with the old gods. He is fiercely protective of his wife and children, whom he loves deeply. Eddard is known for his unwavering sense of humor and justice, and his family finds him kind, although some consider his reserved personality a sign of coldness and disdain. Among his enemies, Eddard has the reputation of having cold eyes, thought to reflect his frozen heart. While riding his great war horse in the north, Ned wears furs and leathers. Ned also wears silk and linen, tunics, and a belt of heavy silver links. His surcoat is fine white velvet with a direwolf badge over the heart. Ned's cloaks are gray with white, as well as black wool. Lord Stark wields sword and dagger, although he uses ice, a Valyrian steel greatsword, for ceremonial purposes. Jory Cassell is captain of Ned's guard. In history, for his youth, Eddard was born at Winterfell as the second son of Lord Rhaegar Stark and Lady Leanna Stark. He had one older brother, Brandon, and two younger siblings, Leanna and Benjamin. Eddard was fostered by Lord Jon Arryn at the Eyrie from the age of 8. There, Eddard befriended his fellow lord, Robert Baratheon, while Lord Jon became like a second father to him. When he reached the age of 16, Eddard was a man grown and divided his time between Winterfell and the Eyrie. During one of his visits to Winterfell, Eddard carried a wedding proposal from Robert to his father, Lord Rhaegar, who agreed to betroth his daughter, Leanna, to Eddard's friend. Leanna later expressed that her belief that Robert would never keep to one bed, having heard about Maya Stone, Robert's bastard daughter, in the Vale of Arryn. Eddard recalled having seen the child, but was unable to deny her existence. Lord Roderick Ricewell hoped to wed his daughter, Barbara, to Brendan of Eddard. Tourney at Harrenhal. In 281 AC, at the age of 18, Eddard came down from the Eyrie to attend the tourney at Harrenhal. Also present were Eddard's foster brother, Robert, his foster father, John, and his three siblings, Brandon, Leanna, and Benjamin. It was during this tourney that Eddard met Howland Reed, one of his father's bannermen. Howland and Eddard remained friends for the rest of their lives. During the opening feast, Eddard saw Ashara Dane, a lady-in-waiting to Princess Elia Martell. He danced with her later that night, but only after his older brother Brandon had spoken to her on his behalf, since he himself was too shy. Eddard was present during the final joust, where Prince Rhaegar Targaryen passed over his own wife, Elia, the crown Leanna, the Queen of Love and Beauty. Eddard would remember this moment as, quote, the moment when all smiles died, unquote, years later. The following year, Eddard's sister, Leanna, was abducted by Prince Rhaegar. Brandon rode to King's Landing in anger, but he was arrested when he threatened the crown prince. Lord Rhaegar Stark was summoned to King's Landing, and when he demanded a trial by combat, both he and Brandon were executed at the command of King Aerys II Targaryen. Aerys' next step was to demand that Jon Arryn send him the heads of his former wards, Eddard and Robert. Jon refused and instead called his banners. Leanna Stark. Leanna Stark was the only daughter of Lord Rhaegar Stark and his wife, Lady Leanna Stark. She had two older brothers, Brandon and Eddard, and one younger brother, Benjamin. Her abduction by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was the event that ultimately triggered Robert's rebellion and led to the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty. She is portrayed by both Cordelia Hill as a child in season 6 and Aisling Franciosi as a young adult during Season 6 and Season 7 flashbacks in the television adaptation Game of Thrones. In appearance and character, Leanna is described by most people as beautiful, though Maester Yandel described her as, quote, a wild and boyish young thing with none of the Princess Elia's delicate beauty, unquote. Tywin Lannister recalls Leanna having a wild beauty, quote unquote, about her. According to her brother Eddard, Leanna had been a child woman of surpassing loveliness. She was slim of frame. Arya Stark, with her brown hair, long face, and gray eyes, resembles Leanna in appearance, according to Eddard Stark. Marjorie Tyrell, also brown of hair, is believed by some to resemble Leanna, though Eddard disagrees. According to Eddard, Leanna had a touch of wildness to her, which was described as, quote, the wolf blood, unquote, by her father, Rhaegar Stark. Eddard compares her to his tomboyish daughter, Arya, in personality, adding that Leanna probably would have carried a sword if their father had allowed it. Leanna was strong of will, while Robert Baratheon, who had been deeply infatuated with Leanna and remains very much in love with her memory over 15 years after her death, to the point of causing major strain in his marriage to Cersei Lannister, believes Leanna would never have publicly opposed him the way Cersei does. However, according to Eddard, Robert never really knew Leanna. He says that Robert saw only Leanna's beauty and never, quote, the iron underneath, unquote. Leanna may have been considerably less enthusiastic about the marriage than Robert was, as she commented to Ned that Robert's love for her would not prevent him from being unfaithful after their marriage. Leanna is noted to have been a skilled rider who loved to ride. According to Harwin of Winterfell, Leanna rode, quote, like a Northman, unquote, while Barbary Dustin describes her as a centaur, and Bruce Bolton states that Leanna was half a horse herself, quote unquote. Leanna had been fond of flowers and loved the scent of winter roses. In history for her early life, born at Winterfell, Leanna was the only daughter of Lord Rhaegar Stark and Lady Lyanna Stark. She had two older brothers, Brandon and Eddard, and one younger brother, Benjamin. Leanna's brother, Eddard, was fostered in the Eyrie by Lord John Arryn since the age of 8, where he befriended his fellow ward, Robert Baratheon. Eddard brought Robert's suit to Winterfell, and Rhaegar agreed to betroth his daughter to the young Lord of Storm's End. However, that night, Leanna confided to Eddard that she believed Robert would never be able to keep the one bed. She had heard that Robert had an illegitimate daughter in the Vale, which Eddard could not deny. He attempted to persuade her that what Robert had done before their betrothal was insignificant, and that he would love her, but Leon informed him that love could not change a man's nature. The year of the false spring. Leanna was present at the tourney at Harrenhal in 281 AC. She happened upon Howland Reed, who was being bullied by 3 young squires. none older than 15. She roared, "That's my father's man you're kicking," quote unquote, and attacked them with a tourney sword. The bullies scattered, and Leanna took Howland back to her tent, where she cleaned his wounds and bound them with linen. Then she introduced him to her brothers Brandon, Eddard, and Benjen. That evening, a feast was held to celebrate the start of the tourney. Leanna persuaded Howland to attend the feast, as he was highborn, had as much right to attend as anyone. During the feast, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, a noted musician, performed a sad and beautiful song that made Leanna weep. However, when Benjen teased her for crying, she poured wine over his head. During the feast, Leanna recognized the 3 squires who had bullied Howland and pointed them out to her brothers. A mystery knight, known as the Knight of the Laughing Tree, defeated the knights the 3 bullies served and demanded them to be chastised as ransom payment. Some fans have suggested Leanna for the identity of the mystery knight. Prince Rhaegar won the tournament, but instead of crowning his own wife, Princess Elia Martell, as the Queen of Love and Beauty, Rhaegar shocked those present by presenting the laurel of blue winter roses to Leanna, placing it in her lap with the tip of his lance. At that moment, all smiles died. Brandon Stark believed Rhaegar's actions to have been a slight upon Leanna's honor. Some people say that Robert, Leanna's betrothed, laughed at Rhaegar's action, claiming that Rhaegar had only paid Leanna her due. However, those closer to Robert claimed that Robert brooded over the insult and grew resentful of Rhaegar henceforth. Benjen Stark. Benjen Stark, also known as Ben Stark, is the younger brother of Lord Eddard Stark and first Ranger of the Night's Watch in the television adaptation Game of Thrones. He is portrayed by Joseph Mall, and in a season 6 flashback by Matteo Alessi. In appearance, Benjen has sharp features and blue eyes, in which a hint of laughter is often present. He has long legs and is very thin. Benjen dresses in black, as befits a man from the Night's Watch. When visiting Winterfell, he also wears a silver buckle and a heavy silver chain. In history, Benjen was the youngest child of Lord Rhaegar Stark and Lady Lyanna Stark. He attended the tourney at Harrenhal with his siblings, Brandon, Eddard, and Leanna, in 281 AC. At the tournament, Leanna rescued their father's vassal, Howland Reed, from an attack by 3 squires. Benjen offered Howland a horse and some armor so he could challenge his attackers. During the feast, held to celebrate the start of the tournament, he teased Leanna when she cried for a sad and beautiful song by the noted musician, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Leanna poured wine over his head for teasing him. A black brother from the Night's Watch spoke up during the feast, attempting to convince the gathered people to join the Black Brothers. Benjen took the plea to heart. The first time Benjen got well and truly drunk, he was younger than 14. Now, as to what became of AJ Baratheon, the mysterious knight who had been declared a lord after unhorsing a good friend of Prince Rhaegar, and in as much of humiliation, ordered to shovel the shit from stables, he had disappeared conveniently, perhaps because he also overheard someone asking questions, and it was getting too close to his identity being discovered. So he had disappeared. At some time, while things are going on in King's Landing, as he was getting much older now and showing much maturity, he had long hair and a dignified mustache, and met a very beautiful, bright, blonde-haired Valyrian from the House of Valerian, known as Princess Sashka Daenerys Valerian. They fell in love immediately and were soon wed, and he had consummated the marriage. And she would soon have a daughter named, known as Princess Elsa Valerian. But this would not come about until probably sometime just before the birth of the soon-coming Daenerys Stormborn of the House Targaryen. And she would be known as the distant cousin to Daenerys Stormborn Targaryen. And unfortunately, her view will be about short in history, because while Daenerys was curious about many things, including how men made love, the one that would be born of Princess Sashka would be more interested in exploring the world they lived in. However, this would be a first wedding event that does take place. The next one to get married in the realm of the kingdoms is Garland Tyrell to Leonette Fossaway, and they make quite the lovely couple. Then, Renly Baratheon, which is quite a shock to everybody, because they would expect Robert Baratheon to be married first, being the eldest brother, or at the very least, Stannis Baratheon. But in fact, it was Renly Baratheon who caught the eye of the very lovely young Marjorie Tyrell. They soon fell in love, and eventually they too had gotten married, and so celebrate together, watching various events at the House of Tyrell. As things continue on in the realm of the kingdom, Jaime Lannister of House Lannister continues to serve in the King's Guard. Raised to the knightly order in 281 AC, Jaime was served in King Aerys II Targaryen's King's Guard for 2 years. Jaime grew more and more disillusioned, witnessing the Mad King's growing insanity and tendency for burning men alive. In 282 AC, Jaime witnessed the executions of Brandon and Lord Rhaegar Stark, standing at the foot of the Iron Throne as the 2 Starks were dying. Jaime coped by, quote, going away inside, unquote, focusing on thoughts of Cersei instead of the events occurring in front of him. Afterwards, he was reminded by his Lord Commander, Sir Gerald Hightower, that he swore a vow to guard the king, not to judge him. Jaime would later advise others to, quote, go away inside, unquote, as a way to deal with a harsh reality and making an appalling task tolerable. King Aerys II becomes the Mad King. When a place in the King's Guard became available after Sir Harlan Grandison died in his sleep, Aerys decided to appoint Lord Tywin Lannister's eldest and only able-bodied son, Sir Jaime, as the youngest knight ever to join the order. Tywin, and later his son, Jaime, came to believe that Aerys had intended this not as an honor, but a slight to House Lannister, meant to deprive Tywin of his heir and allow Aerys to hold Jaime hostage for his father's loyalty. Unknown to Tywin, this scheme had originally been hatched by Tywin's very own daughter, Cersei, who had proposed the idea to King Aerys, as she wished for Jaime to join the order as to prevent Tywin from betrothing him to Lysa Tully, as Tywin and Lord Hoster Tully had been discussing. Aerys had made his announcement during court, and Tywin had thanked him openly for the honor the king bestowed upon his house. In reality, he had been furious and pleading illness. Tywin resigned his position as Hand and returned to Casterly Rock with his daughter. Aerys accepted Tywin's resignation and appointed Lord Owen Merryweather as his replacement, an amiable but not especially competent old man whose main qualifications as Hand were his willingness to throw lavish feasts and offer the king constant flattery. The young knight, Jaime, would officially join the King's Guard in a ceremony at a later date. Lord Tywin now gone from court, the new focus of Aerys' mistrust was his own son and heir, Prince Rhaegar, who had become wary of his father's behavior. At court, there was growing tension between the factions loyal to the king and those loyal to his heir, Prince Rhaegar. Aerys may have been mad and cruel to those he deemed his enemies, but he was lavish with wealth and titles to those who enjoyed his trust. Those loyal to the king were Lord Carlton Chelstead, Maester of Coin, Lord Lucerys Valerian, the Master of Ships, Lord Seamund Staunton, the Master of Laws, Varys, the Master of Whispers, and Wisdom, Rossart. All enjoyed the king's trust, and at court held great power, and they had learned how to twist the king's madness to their own benefit. They had good reason to oppose Aerys' removal from the Iron Throne. Rhaegar's supporters were young Lord John Connington, Sir Miles Newton, Sir Richard Monmouth, and the Dornishmen who accompanied him at court, including Princess Elia's uncle, Prince Lewin Martell of the King's Guard, and Sir Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning, also of the King's Guard, and who was Rhaegar's dearest friend. It fell to Grand Maester Pycelle and the Hand of the King, Lord Owen Merryweather, the unenviable task of trying to keep the peace between the factions. Pycelle even dispatched a letter to the Citadel, writing that tension and division at court strongly resembled those before the Dance of the Dragons. Pycelle was fearful of a civil war between those loyal to the king and those who supported the prince would break out unless some accord could be reached that would satisfy both factions. Lord Walter Went announced a tourney would be held at Harrenhal in either 280 AC or 281 AC to rival any previous tournament. The tourney was to be held at 281 AC. It is believed by some that the tournament was secretly arranged and financed by Prince Rhaegar, as a pretext so Rhaegar could meet up with the great lords of the realm to discuss arranging a great council and the removal of his father. The tournament was announced by Lord Gwyn shortly after his brother, Sir Oswell of the Kingsguard, visited his older brother. Aerys at first was counseled by Lord Chelstead to forbid the tourney. Lord Staunton went as far to suggest the king should outlaw all tournaments. Lord Meriwether intervened by pointing out such events were extremely popular with the highborn and lowborn, and that attempting to ban more outlaw tourneys would make King Aerys unpopular and strengthen Rhaegar. Aerys decided to attend the tournament the first time he left the Red Keep since the defiance of Duskendale. He also decided that the tournament would be the perfect place to initiate Sir Jaime Lannister into the Kingsguard. Aerys also hoped his presence at the tourney would win back the love of his people. That was his intention. It backfired horrifically. Since the defiance of Duskendale, the king had not taken care of his appearance. His fear of blades meant he would not permit his hair to be cut or his nails to be groomed. His hair and beard were unwashed, matted, and tangled, and his nails were yellow and grew 9 inches in length. His fear and paranoia of poison made him thin and gaunt. The lords and knights at the tourney were appalled at what their monarch had become. Nor was his behavior that of a sane man, going from mirth to melancholy at a snap of the fingers. His bouts of hysterical laughter, long silences, sudden rages, and constant weeping made all present weary. In contrast, Prince Rhaegar looked every inch a leader and warrior. Tall, clean, handsome, well-groomed. This prince was unstoppable in the lists, winning bout after bout. The young Jaime Lannister said his vows before the king, with the realm looking on. A cheer went up as the young handsome knight joined the king's guard, a cheer that Aerys at the time believed to be for him. A mystery knight, the Knight of the Laughing Tree, competed in the tournament. Certain the knight had concealed his identity because he was an enemy of the crown. Aerys ordered Rhaegar to discover his identity. The mystery knight could not be found. Prince Rhaegar went on to win the tournament, shocked all those present by crowning Leanna Stark, rather than his wife, Princess Alia Martell, his queen of love and beauty. The next year in 282 AC, sometime after the birth of Rhaegar's heir, Prince Aegon, Prince Rhaegar disappeared Leanna, apparently having kidnapped her. Her eldest brother, Brandon, rode to King's Landing with several friends when word of his sister's disappearance reached him. Upon arriving at the Red Keep, Brandon roared for Rhaegar to come out and die, quote unquote. As it turned out, Rhaegar was not present, but Aerys was. The king had Brandon and his companions arrested on charges of conspiring against the life of the crown prince, demanding that their fathers present themselves in court to answer for their sons' crimes. When they did so, Aerys had them all executed with a fair trial except Ethan Glover. Lord Rhaegar Stark demanded a trial by combat. King Aerys chose fire as his champion. Lord Rhaegar was burned alive by wildfire, as Brandon was forced to watch, strapped into a torture device that caused him to strangle himself in his attempts to save his father. His paranoia still unsatisfied, the king ordered Lord John Arryn to send him the heads of Lyanna's next brother, Eddard Stark, now the Lord of Winterfell, and Lyanna's fiancé, Lord Robert Baratheon, who were present at the Eyrie. Aeron refused and raised his banners in revolt. Thus, the king's brutal acts triggered a chain of events that would become known as the War of the Usurper to Targaryen loyalists and Robert's rebellion to those who fought on the rebel side. House Aeron, House Stark, and House Baratheon. Later on in the war also, House Tully, unified in rebellion against the Iron Throne. Meanwhile, Maya Stone. Maya Stone is a young woman serving House Royce of the Gates of the Moon. She is one of King Robert I Baratheon's bastards. Maya serves as a guide on the treacherous rocky climb from the Vale to the Eyrie, leading trains of mules such as Whitty. She also transports foodstuff from the foot of the giant's lambs to the Eyrie. In appearance and character, Maya is a tall, strapping young woman with coal black hair cut short, deep blue eyes. Her eyes are said to be her best feature. Maya is said to have a mirthful, lusty personality. She tends to dress in a masculine manner, eschewing dresses for leather. She is 17 or 18 years of age. In history, young Robert Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, fathered Maya, his first child, on a commoner, while he and Eddard Stark were being fostered in the Vale of Arryn, at the court of Jon Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie. When Leanna Stark, Ned's sister, heard of Maya's birth and parentage, she became less enthusiastic about her betrothal to Robert. Robert often brought Ned along during his daily visits to see Maya, even after he lost interest in her mother. Maya remained in the Vale at the Gates of the Moon. When Robert became king after Robert's rebellion and took up residence in the Red Keep of King's Landing. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, tourney at Harrenhal. In either 280 AC or 281 AC, Lord Walter Went announced a tourney that would be held at Harrenhal to rival any previous tournament. It is believed by some that the tourney was secretly arranged and financed by Prince Rhaegar as a pretext, so Rhaegar could meet up with great lords of the realm to discuss arranging a great council, the removal of his father. The tournament was announced by Walter shortly after his brother Sir Oswell of the King's Guard visited his older brother. Lord Varys alerted Aerys II to this possibility. The king decided to attend the tourney. During the great tourney at Harrenhal, Rhaegar seemed unstoppable and defeated even Sir Arthur Dayne, taking the Winter Rose crown for the Queen of Love and Beauty. He revealed his interest in Leanna Stark by passing over his wife, Princess Elia of Dorne, and setting it in Leanna's lap. Eddard Stark later recalled that moment was, quote, when all the smiles died, unquote. The next year, Rhaegar seemingly kidnapped Leanna for reasons unknown. This act ultimately triggered Robert's rebellion and the downfall of the Targaryen dynasty. Quentyn Tyrell. Sir Quentyn Tyrell was a knight of House Tyrell during the reign of Aerys II Targaryen. He was a cousin of Lord Mace Tyrell. He has one son, Sir Olymer Tyrell. In history, Quentyn died at the Battle of Ashford during Robert's rebellion. Tyrion Lannister, Childhood Part 2. Continuing on with Tyrion Lannister's childhood. During most of Tyrion's childhood, his father Tywin served as Hand of the King to King Aerys II Targaryen in King's Landing, and as a consequence, was absent from home for longer periods of time. As a child, Tyrion was lonely. Brother Jaime left Casterly Rock to serve as a squire at Craighall in 277 AC, while his sister Cersei left for the court of King's Landing in 278 BC. At the age of 6 or 7, one of his uncles taught him tumbling, which he happily did for half a year at Casterly Rock until Tywin returned from King's Landing and forbade it. Knowing he would never be a knight as a child, Tyrion thought he could become the High Septon instead, as the crystal crown added a foot to one's height. As such, he studied the holy books. However, at the age of 13, Tyrion fell in love, and that quickly replaced the thoughts of priesthood. He and his brother Jaime rescued a common girl, Tisha, from some bandits near Casterly Rock. While Jaime went after the bandits, Tyrion took care of Tisha. To his amazement, Tisha liked him, and they eventually made love. Tyrion became so enamored by her that he bribed a septon and married her in secret. Tisha would sing the marriage song, "The Seasons of My Love," for him. Their marriage lasted only 2 weeks, however. When Tyrion's father learned about the wedding, he commanded Jaime to say that Tisha was a prostitute whom Jaime had hired to take Tyrion's virginity. Because the whore had presumed to marry a Lannister, Tywin had his guards rape Tisha for a silver each, and then made Tyrion go last for a gold coin, stating that a Lannister was worth more. Victor Tyrell. Sir Victor Tyrell was a knight of House Tyrell, a distant cousin of head of house, Lord Mace Tyrell, father of Victoria and Sir Leo Tyrell. In history, Victor was slain by the Smiling Knight of the Kingswood Brotherhood. Olenna Tyrell. Not much is heard about Olenna Tyrell, other than the fact that she did gain much wealth and fame and riches. One can only theorize that perhaps this was gained when Luther I Tyrell, not paying attention and was going hawking, dove off the cliff with his horse and broke his neck. So, as it would be a custom in the realm of the kingdoms, being a widow by a death caused by accident, she gained all that her husband, Luther I Tyrell, had in his possessions, thus becoming a very powerful woman. Meanwhile, AJ is getting things ready for him and his new wife, Sashka Valerian, to head to Essos to secure a place in the event he has to save the last 2 dragons. While they are inside, Sasha and her maidens, he doesn't hear, at first, someone coming up behind him. And as the twig breaks, he reaches for his sword. "I'd unhand that sword if I were you, unless you do not want to keep your head." AJ knows now he's been had. "Turn around, mystery knight. Or should I call you uncle?" Reluctantly, AJ puts his hands in the air, let going of the handle grip, and turns, and to most surprise sees Rhaegar with a sword and his other guards pointing swords at him. "Forgive me, that is Prince Rhaegar. I did not know it was you. So is this it? You're just gonna slay me like your father would?" No, I don't follow the footsteps of my father. It's okay, it's not much you can do now. We've already humiliated him enough. They all put their swords up, and Rhaegar sheaths his. And so they stand looking at each other. As we look back at that, there is much reference to the defiance of Duskendale. Perhaps this is the point of where he becomes the Mad King. It could answer many questions why he became the Mad King. That wouldn't be just one incident, but many things probably the fairly middle-aged King Aerys II Targaryen's mind. Lord Daenerys Darkland of Duskendale desired to win a charter for Duskendale, which would give him more autonomy from the crown. He made his proposal to the crown in 277 AC, but Lord Tywin Lannister, however, refused the proposal. Lord Daenerys would not give up so easily. Having noticed the deteriorated relationship between Aerys and Tywin, Lord Daenerys decided to withhold his payments to the crown and instead invited the king to Duskendale to hear his petition for a new charter. While Aerys had intended to decline the invitation, the king changed his mind when Lord Tywin advised him to refuse the strongest possible terms. Eager to demonstrate his ability to handle the situation without the help of his hand, Aerys decided to settle the issue personally and bring the defiant Lord Darkland to heel. Informing Grand Maester Pycelle and the small council of his decision, Aerys traveled to Duskendale, taking a small force led by Sir Gawain Gon of the King's Guard, against Lord Tywin's advice. The invitation proved to be a trap, however, and Aerys walked right into it. Some of his escort, most notably Sir Gawain, were killed trying to defend their king. Aerys was taken prisoner. Outrage was the response to this news from Duskendale. His hand of the king fell to Lord Tywin Lannister to resolve the crisis. He amassed an army and laid siege to the town in what became known as the Defiance of Duskendale. The situation remained in a stalemate for 6 months, with Lord Daenerys threatening to execute the king at the first sign that Tywin intended to storm the town. In the end, it was Sir Barristan Selmy, the King's Guard, who staged a daring infiltration and managed to rescue the king. Lord Daenerys immediately surrendered and begged for mercy. In his fury, Aerys immediately had him beheaded. His rage still not sated, the king next ordered House Dark utterly destroyed, along with House Hollard, which had sided with them. Every last member of both families were tortured at excruciating length before being burned alive, with the sole exception of the child, Dontos Hollard, who was spared only at Sir Barristan's pleading. Sir Barristan later developed doubts about his actions at Duskendale, wondering whether Aerys' death in Lord Daenerys' dungeon and Prince Rhaegar's ascent to the throne would not have spared the Seven Kingdoms much grief. Following the defiance, The defiance of Duskendale plunged Aerys deeper into his descent into madness, deeply shaken by his imprisonment. He refused to leave the Red Keep for the next 4 years. His jealous and suspicious nature deepened into paranoia and eventually outright delusions, seeing evidence of treachery everywhere. Aerys' relations with Lord Tywin deteriorated even more rapidly. The king felt his hand had wanted him to perish in the dungeon of Duskendale. Aerys also no longer trusted his wife or his heir. In his paranoia, Aerys believed that Tywin and Rhaegar had conspired to have him killed by storming Duskendale, so Rhaegar would ascend the Iron Throne and marry Tywin's daughter. To prevent such conspiracies between Rhaegar and Tywin, Aerys summoned his old childhood friend, Lord Steffan Baratheon, to court, making him a member of the Small Council. Aerys publicly announced that Steffan would go to Volantis to find a bride for Rhaegar of proud Valyrian blood. The fact that Aerys entrusted this task to Steffan instead of Tywin, or Rhaegar, caused many to mutter that Aerys intended to make Steffan his new hand of the king on the successful completion of this mission, and that Aerys planned to have Lord Tywin arrested and executed for high treason. Many lords took delight in the prospect. Fate had other plans. Lord Steffan's mission turned out to be a failure. On the return voyage, his ship was caught in a storm and sank just off the coast of Storm Bend, inside of his 2 eldest children, Robert and Stannis. Aerys got the notion in his head that Tywin had somehow assassinated Lord Steffan. He even stated to Pycelle that he could not dismiss Tywin as Ham, as Tywin would have him killed then as well. In the final years of his reign, where Tywin was still Ham, Aerys never met with Lord Tywin unless all 7 of the King's Guard knights were present. His paranoia and hysterical madness ever deepening, Aerys heard word of the talents of a certain eunuch named Varys. The eunuch was brought to court and appointed as Aerys' Master of Whisperers on the Small Council. The king reasoned that only a foreigner with no competing loyalties in Westeros could be trusted to alert him of potential threats. The Spider, as Varys became known to the small folk, used the crown's gold to form a vast web of informers. Varys was also always seen crouching at the king's side, whispering in his ear. Aerys also resolved the matter of Rhaegar's marriage. In early 279 AC, Prince Rhaegar was betrothed to Princess Alia Martell. In early 280 AC, the 2 were wed in a lavish ceremony at the Great Sept Baelor. Fearing to be assassinated, Aerys refused to attend. Neither did he allow Prince Viserys to attend. Rhaegar and his new bride decided to take up residence on Dragonstone instead of remaining in King's Landing, which led some to mutter that Rhaegar planned on disposing his father and seizing the throne. Others claimed that Aerys II meant to disinherit Rhaegar and name his younger son, Prince Viserys, the new heir. The birth of Princess Rhaenys, Aerys' first grandchild, did not unite the estranged father and son. When Rhaegar presented the girl at court, Queen Rhaella embraced her grandchild warmly. Aerys refused to touch her, stating that she smelled Dornish. Aerys grew brooding, capricious, and increasingly fascinated with fire, especially the highly flammable substance known as wildfire, which was said to be a cousin to dragon flame. At 280 AC, Aerys had taken to using wildfire for executing alleged traitors, rather than hangings and beheadings. The pyromancers became a fixture at the king's court and wisdom Rhaegar, who carried out the executions, was eventually named to the small council. All the executions by fire aroused the king, and while he and his wife had slept in separate chambers for some years and avoided each other by day as well, Aerys would always claim his marriage rights after such an execution by fire, brutally abusing his wife in bed. Later on, as we remember, a secret investigation of this mysterious knight was conducted without AJ, the one being investigated, knowing about it. They couldn't find him anywhere because he had disappeared. They had returned and informed Varys, because he is now the one who whispers, of the investigation they were placed in charge of. This surprised Varys, but he was made sworn to secrecy never to bring it up ever in his lifetime, which he was very good never to do. Which is why you'll never hear about it in the series Game of Thrones. Even after Aerys II Targaryen does meet his end by one known as Kingslayer. In the event, though, Varys does inform Aerys II Targaryen as to who the mysterious knight is, and that only theory would presume that his aunt, Rhaella Targaryen, the last sibling to his father, who was Jaehaerys II Targaryen, would have at some point during the Blackfire Rebellion possibly conceived another, but records were never documented or received, or perhaps the records were lost. They could not prove that there was treachery where they were purposely withheld. Aerys II Targaryen could have had his aunt arrested, but he had much too respect for her because of her being an elderly age. So he just let this one go and just said nothing more about it. But he made a point, having Rhaegar, though tensions between them were building, go meet this strange one, bring him to me so that I may know him and where his lineage comes from. And this was something that Rhaegar, for the first time, took delight in meeting his father's request, because this also has his curiosity as well. And so thus ends the second part of the great fall of the House of Targaryen, with King Aerys II Targaryen reigning. As it came to the end of this last chapter, William then decides that perhaps it would be a good time to take a break, because this now would be the sad moment for the great fall of the House of Targaryen. Well, any thoughts? Yeah. Is it alright if we take a break, Daenerys? I know this next part's going to be, well, it's going to be the sad part for the great fall of the House Targaryen, and I know that's, even though you weren't born yet, I know that must be like a painful part of your past, of your genealogy. Yes, it was something that I don't think any of the members of the House Targaryen foresaw. Unfortunately, there was nothing that could be done, though my brother Rhaegar was quite the catch of many women's eyes. His decisions with my father's indecisions together, I believe, is what brought the house down. Though it took me a while at first to accept this, because I felt that it was always the undoing and treachery of the House Baratheon. But in time, after having returned from the abyss, come to realize that many have made mistakes, even my own house, in the past. But you are right. It's not exactly a memory that is pleasant. Well, then, I guess it would be okay to take a break then, right? Before we go on to the next part. Yes, I think you are right. Let us break for now. We'll come back. And when we do, this is where the Robert's Rebellion will commence. So with that, they get up and leave the Hall of Genealogical Records, past the staircase that leads to the other library, and out to the palace terrace.